Tonight, Hinnomnor set to become a major typhoon in the Western Pacific. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical weather bulletin for August 29th. The tropics are warming up, it would seem, with 50 storms so far this year now, number 50 being Tropical Storm Hinnamnor in the Western Pacific, located not far from the Ogasawara Islands of Japan. It is not the only place where we're expecting tropical activity soon. Look at the Atlantic. On day 90 of hurricane season, we now have 3 areas of interest. The middle one we've now given 70% chance of forming, and the other 2 chances have increased as well. There's a lot to monitor in the Atlantic over the next week, and it's an uncertain picture, but there could be 3 storms. On day 107 of the East Pacific hurricane season, we've also marked an area of interest here at 10%, mainly due to it being quite far out in its range. Those chances could increase if model support increases and it gets closer to the present time. In the Western Pacific, Tropical Storm Hinnomnor has formed much earlier in the day and has strengthened rapidly. It is now already on the verge of becoming a typhoon. The other area of interest that we had marked towards the west doesn't appear to be becoming anything now and has been scrubbed from our screen. And in the Southwest Indian Ocean, we're still watching one area of interest which has a 40% chance of development, although those chances might start going down soon as time is ticking on that one. Let's check the latest satellite imagery around the world. Here's what the Atlantic looks like today, and you can quite clearly see the area of interest in the main development region, and it's been looking better, slightly better throughout the course of today, perhaps trying to get some sort of a rotation going. Convection's been a little bit on the light side. There's a lot of dry air in the region. I doubt strengthening, if any, would be fast to occur. Looking towards the western area there, you can see in the Caribbean there's 1 or 2 little bits of activity, but we're still waiting for that main ignition source. And in the Eastern Pacific there's a few monsoonal type developments in the tropical zone and some thunderstorms over Mexico. Here's a close-up look at Invest 91L, which is the middle one that we're talking about, 70% chance of developing. This is the water vapor imagery once again, showing you a close-up loop of what's been going on more to the present time there on this rapid scan. And there is the classic infrared imagery showing that convection has been difficult to come by. We would have liked to have shown you some visible imagery, which probably would have made it look better, but obviously it is too late in the day for that, and we're in night time here. But convection still hanging on a bit, and we could see some further development. Western Pacific right now, you can quite clearly see the progression of Hinnomnor, which is looking pretty decent when you look at that satellite imagery. A bit of a shrimp shape that people often associate with substantial strengthening in weaker storms, but it is getting up there in terms of intensity and is starting to veer off towards the west. Indian Ocean is looking fairly calm, although of course you can still see the potential rotation in the Southwest Indian Ocean that we are of course monitoring. There isn't a huge amount to it yet. It's an extremely large trough pattern. And in the Australian region, things looking rather quiet here, although there's quite a few clouds up around the eastern part of Australia, which is probably going to be producing more substantial rainfall. Further to the east, another frontal system just between New Caledonia and Fiji. Sea surface temperatures still crabbing outwards along the coast of Mexico. The 30-degree isotherm, which is extending. Temperatures looking pretty decent for near land activity. In the Atlantic, the Gulf is obviously very warm, over 30 degrees Celsius, and look at the amount of region in the Atlantic that the storms have to play with there, 28 degrees over an enormous chunk of the western Atlantic and the tropical zone. A lot of that northern part there being above average. In the Indian Ocean, generally around 30 degrees, well 28 to 30 degrees Celsius. The West Pacific is the South China Sea has dropped a little bit after recent storms. Gulf of Tonkin still piping hot, and where the storm is right now, temperatures are really good too, over 30 degrees in some areas near the storm, and it will be hovering along that isotherm for quite some time as it approaches the Ryukyu Islands of Japan. That storm is expected to strengthen quite a lot. We'll take a look at the models shortly. Here's the sea surface temperature anomalies, way above average in the area that Hinnomnor is tracking over, so that will be part of why it will be able to strengthen so easily. Eastern Pacific is hit and miss with the La Nina, of course, and in the Atlantic it is generally above average, but more amplified in the non-tropical zones further north, mid-Atlantic, etc. Here is the oceanic heat content, which is extremely high in the Caribbean. Anything that forms there is going to have a field day. Bahamas decent as well, and out over the open waters increasing too. Western Pacific is looking very good. A few areas even further north where Hinnamnor is tracking that are going to have high oceanic heat content, particularly near the near Okinawa, and further towards the east, Eastern Pacific looking fair. Check these computer models then right now, and this is what the Atlantic's got to show for itself over the next few days. I don't have the latest in front of me, but you can see it on your screen. It happens all the time, it appears. But what you will see on this loop is that the middle storm ends up forming towards the end of day 5, and the other two systems have a decent chance of forming as well, basically. That's kind of the story here. The GFS scenario proposes that all of these storms eventually form. Here is the Eastern Pacific. We're looking out for that potential tropical storm forming, and there it is once again. So we're seeing signs over there that the season might be coming back again. The Eastern Pacific's been slipping out for quite a while without any storms. It was well ahead of the average for this time of year. It is now only around average. But there we go, our potential next storm on the way. So now let's take a look at the big one, the Western Pacific, and you'll be able to see the storm Hinnomnor and how it rapidly intensifies at times as it approaches Okinawa. It does a stalling motion, a loop round, and then back up through Okinawa and into the East China Sea at quite a steady strength, up to at least category 3 strength as it moves through there. So quite concerning that what might happen with that storm, and it will grow in size, just enormous by the time we get to the later portion of its life. And here is the rainfall expectations from this storm if this was to happen. Just offshore Okinawa, ridiculously high rainfall estimates now from the GFS. As a matter of fact, it has maxed out our scale, which is already an extended scale, up to 64 inches in some areas near Okinawa. I stress that's not over land, but land areas we could be seeing over 12 to 16 inches of rain totals if this forecast was to come to pass. Whether that happens or not is still a big question mark. Into the longer range then, looking once again at the Atlantic. Very frustrating for me because I can't actually see what we're looking at on the screen, so I'm trying to go by memory. What you should see on day 5 to 10 is that these two systems will continue through the Atlantic, and something very interesting starts to happen with the western system, which moves along the eastern seaboard of the United States and then stalls and then moves towards the southwest, which is pretty crazy if you ask me. I certainly doubt that will happen, but that's what the longer range is showing. And looking out towards the other system, which blows up and becomes a substantial hurricane and makes landfall along the border between Texas and Mexico as a probable category 3 or 4. That's towards the end of that 10-day period, so it's still uncertain. But all these signals, and we're getting run consistency, and we're getting multiple models starting to get on board. Some of this could now be on the table for potentially happening. Now, there's been a lot of false signals so far, but I think it's on the way. Western Pacific then, you watch that storm move through and really pulverize the Korean Peninsula and the westernmost Japanese islands. An enormous storm pressure down into the 920s, winds extremely ferocious, but by the time it gets up there and really grows in size, it's going to be a bigger problem in terms of its widespread wind effects rather than its concentrated high maximum sustained winds. Blimey, well that's all the serious stuff over and done with. You can take a look at our merch store and scan the barcode, it'll take you right there for all of our products, and you can request animations on demand, full season and individual storms. You can also check out the Still Waiting for Hone t-shirt, which we of course still are. Into the Scilly range, and I can actually see this one, and there once again you can see the hurricane making landfall in South Carolina and then moving out. There's a big, potentially still a hurricane there, moving off to the northeast. Really strange track if that were to happen. And then there's this second hurricane which comes from that eastern wave that just stalls out there in the Atlantic for ages, for 3 or maybe even 4 days, and actually strengthens initially whilst it's stalling, and then it starts to weaken a little bit, caught between what looks like 2 low pressure systems there, and it can't move through, so that's why it ends up stalling. And once again, looking back at the other hurricane into South Carolina, moving through the east coast, that would be one for the record books in some way or other, I'm pretty sure. Just a crazy track, actually reminds me a little bit of San Kiriako, but there we go. Western Pacific, in the long range, what else comes up? Well, it spits out another enormous tropical cyclone that tries to get itself going there, and it does succeed and becomes a significant typhoon into the 950s, and bam, into the central part of Japan there, and out through to the northern side still as an extremely broad and powerful typhoon. Not as strong in terms of its wind speed, but still low pressure, extremely large wind field. These 2 storms are probably going, if it ever were to happen and to transpire just like this, these 2 storms would be well known for their widespread impacts and not just necessarily their strong winds. Crazy times, but the Western Pacific waters are definitely capable of 2 storms like this in the 16-day period, and that's why, one reason why the GFS is forecasting it, but still very uncertain. On this day last year, August 29th, 2021, Hurricane Ida was set to make landfall in Louisiana as a powerful Category 4 storm, just a year after Laura did the same. Nora was in the Eastern Pacific as a tropical storm, Julian had just formed, and Tropical Depression 10L had also just formed on this day. Feels like well more than a year since this happened, but it has only been 365 days. At least it feels longer than that to me. Starting to lose track of everything that's going on. Well then, this year we are back looking at our list of names. We're still waiting for Danielle in the Atlantic. We are so far back now in the Atlantic. It's 1994, the last time we had a D storm so late. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Javier, and in the Central Pacific, it's Hone. In the Westpac, the next name now is Muifa, and in the North Indian Ocean, we're waiting out for Sitrang. As I was saying with the Atlantic, 2002 was the last time that it was August 29th before we saw the D-name storm. I assume we're going to miss that, and it'll end up being 1994. The Australian region, the next name on the list is Darian. The Southwest Indian Ocean starts with Ashley, and in the South Pacific, the next name up on our list is Harley. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back with another one tomorrow night.